Hello, everybody. Drasco here from 10knorm.com, where my main mission is to normalize six-figure incomes as the minimum wage for heart-centered entrepreneurs. How do I do this? Well, number one, through the 10K Norm coaching program, and number two, through the accompaniment podcast that you are listening to right now. Both are here to help guide heart-centered entrepreneurs that are unable to hit consistent 10K months despite all the personal development work they've done to master their mind, master their offer, master their sales, and in essence, normalize 10K months in 6 months or less. And on today's episode, we have a real talk segment where I bring in a heart-centered entrepreneur on their way towards their own 10K norm. And we have some real talk about what's currently their biggest challenge towards their 10K norm. And in that, we're going to explore who they are, why they do what they do. And then live on the call, I get to help guide them on their way out of a current challenge that they're currently experiencing towards their 10K norm. And today's guest, we have Jessica Malone, and her passion is helping high achieving individuals lead the life they truly desire by removing the clutter in their spaces, in their finances, and in their habits. And she was recently featured in Forbes for the amazing results her clients report. And Jessica is somebody who's leveraged the power of decluttering to get back in touch with her gifts of resiliency, motivation, compassion, and strength. She then used all of these gifts to build the brand that she has now, host annual conferences, and basically launch a successful work from anywhere coaching business. So these endeavors basically opened up the door for her to step away from her corporate job, travel full time, and do her coaching full time. And that's what brings her here today. So Jessica, thank you very much for being on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And it's really cool that you come in here today with this background in work that we're going to dive into with regards to decluttering, because I always say on this podcast and in my coaching, like, people seldom have business problems. They usually have personal problems that show up in their business, right? And we had a brief chat before we started the recording, but it seems to me like that's the same thing that you experience in your clients. It's not usually about the clutter and the mess. That is actually just a reflection of something that's happening internally. So I'd love for you to dive deeper into that and, give us whatever context with regards to how you got into this and all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So for me, it was back in 2016, really, I started this whole journey. In the beginning, it wasn't about entrepreneurship or building a business. I always had these like lingering ideas of becoming an entrepreneur and leaving corporate, but I didn't know what that would look like. And really, where I was at in my life, I just was generally dissatisfied with the life that I had created. I was working a great job. I had the retirement fund growing and I had a great income and it was a prestigious company and all of those things. But I was really just kind of miserable. Like, I was overweight and I struggled with managing my eating and my health. I was struggling with like anxiety attacks. I was just not in a good place despite the way that my life looked. And so I was really just seeking a solution. And I was reading about mindfulness and some of these other things. And Amazon just recommended this book about minimalism. It was like a 21-day minimalism challenge. And I thought, what the heck, my life can't really get any worse. This is how I thought. I mean, probably it could have, but I didn't think it could get any worse at the time. And so I just decided to take the plunge and I started getting rid of things. And it really transformed the way that I thought about my life and the way that I had been living my life up until that point, and realizing, that I hadn't been very intentional. And there were a lot of things that I already knew were not aligned and not the right fit for me, but I was ignoring that anyway. And that kind of brought me to where I was and creating that kind of misery that I was feeling day in and day out. And so from there, when I started to see changes, losing weight, saving money, generally just having a better outlook and feeling happier with my life, I started to share the journey online. So I started a Facebook and an Instagram. I didn't start, I should say, I changed my Facebook and Instagram because prior to that, I had started a food blog called Tex-Mex with Jess, which was part of my weight gain problem. But I switched it over. I just felt like, I want to talk about this. This feels more meaningful. This feels like something other people could probably relate to, and started sharing my story, doing like live videos. And that really was the thing that kind of grew my presence online. And with that growth came this idea that, wow, maybe I could start a business with this. Maybe I could help people by blogging. And so I blogged for a while, did live videos, created e-guides and things like that. And then I decided that I wanted to launch a conference back in 2018. And that made me realize that I really enjoyed enriching other people's lives and pouring into them. And so I decided to explore this idea in an area of coaching. And shortly after that, it'd been 2020, 2 years later, I left my full-time corporate job to focus on my business full-time. So it was, 4 years in the making, really, of building this kind of brand, figuring out who I am and what I want, and then really taking the leap. And from that, I have seen a lot of really great things happen. Like you mentioned, the Forbes article, being featured in a variety of places. My clients have gotten really, really good results. And so I'm really happy with like the decisions and everything that I've made, and just looking at my journey and the arc. And I think where I am today is kind of like, okay, I have all of these really great things. Why am I not seeing the consistency that I'm looking for? Right. And that's kind of where I'm feeling a little bit stuck and challenged. Like I myself have completely transformed my life. My clients have transformed their lives, but still there's some block, and I'm not getting consistent people coming in saying, hey, basically take my money. Like, this sounds amazing. Let's do this. And that's kind of where I'm feeling stuck.
Got it. Okay. So you have this big, and we call it transformation. I think it's unfair to call it a transformation, not because where you are is different from where you were. That is a transformation, but it's like, 4 years in the making is not exactly a transformation. That is a intentional process of changing myself so that
Sure.
in comparison to the before and after, it is a transformation. So, I always like to be cautious with that term because it gives a feeling for somebody who's never gone through it that like, oh, like I press a switch, I do this thing and now I'm different. Like, yeah, I wish it was that way too. I
Mm-hmm.
would love to be able to do that, but not quite. But anyway, so going through this, process of transformation, kind of giving you the accolades and the success and the proof that what I do is clearly driving the change that I initially set out to change. Now it's like this roadblock, right? Like, why is it not happening consistently? Why is it not that people are screaming through and like saying, like, take my money? What is the issue there? So, I have potentially like a few things that I would poke and prod on to kind of explore that. So, but before I get into that, like, why do you think that isn't happening?
Um, I can be pretty self-aware. And so some things that I've identified is that like I said, like you said in my bio, I help high achievers because I myself am a high achiever, performing in school, performing at work. I was just always the top of everything. And so achievement comes very naturally to me, but what doesn't always come naturally is talking about my achievements. I think I learned at an early age, and I can't, pinpoint the event, but I feel like somewhere I internalized that it is okay to achieve, but I shouldn't make other people feel uncomfortable in that achievement. To talk about my achievements too much is kind of like bragging. And I find that that's where I often have a block. There are certain achievements like my weight loss. I could easily get on Instagram and talk about that. But when I talk about my money savings, you can find that on my website. The number is there, plain as day. But if you went to my social pages, you read a blog, you would never see really details about that. And so I think for me, there's some level of, am I allowed to kind of take up space in this way? Can I show up fully as this high achieving person? And for whatever reason, be less focused on who I may repel and more focused on who I can attract. I think that's where my struggle often lies.
Okay, so one aspect of it then is clearly visibility as like an umbrella term, and then that seems to show up as showing up authentically, showing up not even in bravado, but actually just like in your accolades, showing up in the way that I want to show up, because it seems like there is a desire here to want to do that. So there is this kind of visibility umbrella that seems to be standing in the way. So is
Yeah,
that accurate?
I would say that's true.
Okay. And how do you think that's affecting your ability to create your 10K norm?
Well, for one, I think that because the progression of my brand, it started off as a personal blog. So a lot of the people that started following me followed me when I wasn't trying to sell anything. I was just talking about my experience. They resonate with that experience, right? They take that and run with it, whatever they may do. Now my brand has really shifted to where I have an actual product that I want to offer. And I think that because I'm not always showcasing my achievements, but also sometimes the achievements of my clients, it's hard, right? Who wants to buy something when they don't know necessarily what they're going to get, or just hearing one experience, even if they just hear my experience, it's like, okay, well, how do I know that's not a one-off? And so I think that's part of it. And also, I have some clients who share their results, but I often wonder, with the results that my clients are getting, why am I not seeing them share more about what they've created through our work together? And part of me feels like, because I'm struggling with sharing my own achievements and results, right? Maybe I'm making it seem as though like that's something that they also shouldn't do, or maybe, it's not really encouraging them to do it. And so I'm struggling to share, but also I'm not really, people aren't talking about me, if you know what I mean, like to tell their friends, to tell their family, to say, hey, I did this amazing thing, check it out.
Okay. So that's interesting because my question was, how is visibility standing in the way of your 10K norm? And where your mind went to was really just painting a higher resolution problem, meaning you just gave me more
Okay.
details of, okay, well, I'm not showing up in the way that I want my clients to show up. If I'm hesitating being visible, then they're hesitating being visible. So to me, it's just interesting why your brain deflected away from diving into what really is the essence of the question, which is the consequences of choosing. And this is a choice not to be visible. So, number one, why do you
Mm.
think that is? Number two, same question again, like, how do you think it's standing in the way of your 10K norm?
That's interesting because in my head I was answering the question. Um, I also know that I struggle with believing that just like who I am, what I bring to the table, that it's enough. So to answer your first question, I think that's part of it. Part of me feels that and it's probably the high achieving part of me, but part of me just feels like there's always something more to do. There's like another problem I haven't solved yet. That's just the way that my brain thinks. Even when something's really good, I can always find something that would make it better, that would take it to the next. Like I don't settle for like, this is really good, run with it. I'm always just moving on. So the consequence, I guess the consequence is I'm not living my life to the fullest extent because I'm not achieving these consistent 10K months.
Okay. So I'm not living my life to the fullest. So you said extent, or just writing down these notes? That was it.
Yeah, to the fullest extent, yes.
Okay. Got it. So because the income isn't there. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So that makes sense, right? If I'm not going to show up in a way that honors who I am, because I fundamentally actually doubt that as I am right now is enough to show up and or create my 10K norm or my version of it, then I'm in this perpetual cycle of trying to create the very thing that would give me the permission to want the thing in the first place, but we're putting the cart before the horse, right? So does
Mhm.
that make sense, or like do you want me to rephrase that?
Um, I think I understand, but if you could rephrase it, that would help. Yes.
Sure. So it's like right now, the default lens that's driving your lack of being able to live to your fullest extent
Mhm.
is basically like I'm trying to create the thing that I want, which is, let's just say 10K months, but I'm trying to create it from a place of I don't even believe that it's possible. Because fundamentally I'm operating, and this is where the cart before the horse, if I could create it, then I could believe that I could do it. But the essence is this is your 4 minute mile, right? Like, and you know, the story of the 4 minute mile.
No.
Okay. I can't remember the guy's name, but the first guy who ran the 4 minute mile, um, basically that was something that was allowed it to be a complete human like limitation. Like humans are not able to run a 4 minute mile. It's just mechanically, biologically impossible because nobody's done it before. And that was the narrative for a long time. And then I think it was Roger Bannister. I think that was his name. He's like, nope, screw it. I'm gonna run the 4 minute mile. And he did. And what wasn't miraculous was that he did it. What was miraculous was that after he did it, all these people afterwards started running a 4 minute mile. Right. So the whole point here is like 10K norms right now are your 4 minute mile. It's something you haven't done before, but your brain is defaulting to, I get to create this 4 minute mile. I get to create this 10K norm out of a place of having to rely on history, which I haven't actually been able to do it before. So it's this perpetual loop of, I want what I haven't created, but I can't create it because I've never done it before. So does that
Yeah,
resonate
that
with
makes
you?
sense. Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, I don't know. As you were talking, I felt myself getting like kind of emotional, and I was thinking like, why am I feeling this way? But I think what you said that struck me was just this idea that no one had ever done it before. And actually when you said that, I thought for me, it's like a fear that like I said, I've done some really big things already. My first year in entrepreneurship, I landed a feature in Forbes, which is really cool, but sometimes I'm afraid of like, can I keep that kind of success going? Like, I almost wish it had happened later because it feels like such a heavy weight to carry.
Yeah. And I can see like the emotion coming up because it's self-imposed pressure. The pressure is you're putting it on yourself right now.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what is the emotion that's coming up right now?
Um, I mean, fear, like at its core, but I think that leaving leaving my job, obviously that's a big deal for everybody. But for me, it was big because I really did something like just because I thought it was a good idea. And my life has not had that kind of trajectory. I always did what other people said I should do, and I was successful. And now I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm out on this limb. Like, okay, there is success and these good things are happening, but I have no frame of reference for long-term success of doing things that I really wanted to do.
Got it. So it's almost like an element of self-trust that's lacking.
Yeah.
I can trust myself when I'm in the confines of a defined system, school, work, community, whatever. But when I'm by myself, I don't trust myself because there's nobody giving me permission and
Hmm.
structure and constraints on what it actually looks like to succeed and what's allowable as success. Is that correct?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay. So what I would say there, so we have this aspect of like I'm afraid to be visible because I fundamentally don't believe that I'm good enough to create 10K months. Subsequently, deeper than that, I don't trust myself and I'm afraid, but fear isn't usually something that makes us cry, at least not like emotionally crying. So what I'm wondering then is what's behind the tears? Like, is it the sadness over not trusting myself? Is it something else? Like what resonates with you?
Yeah, I think it's the sadness of not trusting myself. Um, yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay. And what are you sad about specifically?
I think I'm sad that I've reached this point in my life. I mean, 30 is young, don't get me wrong, but I'm sad that 30 years into my life, you know, I still don't trust myself. I think I wish I had learned to do that earlier.
Got it. Okay. So it's more the regret, the, I mean, FOMO is not really the right word, but it's like I
Yeah.
spent all this time and have missed out on opportunities where I could have learned to trust myself. And now here I am diving off the deep end, realizing I don't trust myself. Is that more accurate?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. So when you look at that cumulatively, right? Like if we put that under the umbrella, that's basically like you're trying to build your dreams from a place of I'm not good enough to build my dreams. Would that be like an accurate summation?
I think it's I'm trying to build my dreams from a place of not necessarily that I'm not good enough, like I don't deserve it, but that I'm not capable of sustaining it
Okay. So it's not, I'm not good enough to have it. I'm not good enough to
to
keep
keep
it.
it.
Okay. Got it. So I'm not good enough to keep it. So really, when it comes down to, can you build a sustainable business with that sentiment?
No way.
It's going to be very hard, or you're going to push very hard and do it, and it's going to blow up in your face, which is also a common thing, and one that actually I went through with my first business. So I understand that one very intimately. Um, when you look at your situation from that perspective,
Mhm.
I can never achieve the thing that I want because I fundamentally don't know how to get out of this place of fearing that I can keep it and being good enough to keep it. How does that affect your life right now?
Um, it feels like I was just working through this kind of this morning. So it's something that I think would be a good example. Like I have so many ideas, so many pre-written Instagram posts, blog posts, audio notes that could be some kind of podcast. Like I have so many things. And when I listen to them, I'm like, they're really good. This is really good. And then the fear is like, can I keep saying like profound things, you know, consistently? Can I keep pumping out blogs? Can I keep putting out Instagram, whatever the thing is? What can I keep doing that? And then I feel like I just sit on it. So really good ideas, stuff that I know it's good, but it just sits, you know, and it's not being put out to the world because it's like, well, what if they expect me to say something good again tomorrow, you know, or next week or a year from now? And I'm always just thinking about like how could I keep this going? Do I have enough experiences or insights or whatever to keep this going for the long haul?
So one aspect that all this not good enough to keep it is producing is you do a lot of motion, meaning like there's a lot of movement. You record things, you create things, you put things together that never see the life of day.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of expended energy with nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Pushing that further, does all of this stuff sitting on a shelf also affect anybody else?
Yes.
Who?
Um, I think there are people who could benefit from my my coaching, my course, who I'm not reaching because I'm not willing to put myself out there.
So you internally suffer, one through energy that's wasted, the ensuing doom loops that that produces, the actually additional kind of secondary bits of that because it reaffirms that I'm not good enough to keep it because I'm not releasing all this stuff, therefore there's nothing coming in. So there's one aspect of that that affects you and I think causes more suffering, but it also leaves a lot of people suffering because they're not hearing your goodness. So it's like second order effects of
Right.
what that's. So is that accurate?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
agree. I
Anything
think,
else? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the one thing that I'm thinking about is like, um, again, thinking about some of the good things that have happened, the big stuff, the big accolades, I guess you could say, that have happened in this part of my journey. I'm just like, what, how, how did I get into Forbes? How, why, what, like, how are these other really good things happening for me if I'm not sharing my story? I think that's where I feel like there's a disconnect. Like, I can see it on the coaching side, but then also I was doing enough to grow a following. I was doing enough for someone to find me and say, hey, we would love to share your story here. And not just Forbes, but other places. So I think that's where I feel like, why was I able to do that and I can't do this over here?
Well, did all that stuff happen while you were still employed?
Not Forbes, but at pretty much everything before that.
Okay. So would it be safe to assume, or would it be safe to question that because you weren't fully 100% in, this was just a hobby, I could give it up at any time, it doesn't necessarily matter. So you didn't have the baggage that you have now, because now this is all about you. This is part of your identity. This is about how you represented the world. This is about how you show success. Like, would that be accurate?
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a safety net before. It didn't really matter. I could share and share and share, and wasn't really hurting me.
Right. So really why this is becoming so painful now is now, because that container is gone, everything has shifted towards my own self-trust, i.e. my biggest possible fear is now what I'm living, and I'm in some ways losing to it, right? Because I'm not able to replicate those results. So it's like my biggest fear is actually coming true right now. So would that be accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. So how do you think that's affecting your life day to day?
It's like a roller coaster. It's like some days I find that strength, I think about, like, I try to channel, like, okay, you did this really cool thing. Remember that client that was helped, and I push through. But even on those days, I sometimes find myself hiding, like, from Instagram. I'm like, oh, that was a really vulnerable post. That was one that I felt was really good. I think this might actually reach my target audience. And then I'm like, okay, I don't want to be on Instagram right now, because what if people don't respond? And what if I don't get what I'm looking for out of this? So it feels like it's either plunging forward and then suddenly shrinking back, or coming up, being in this high place of, hey, I've got all this good stuff, I'm working on all of these things, and then it just fizzles out, for an extended period of time. Like, I will resurface, but it takes me a while to, like, come back to the surface.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge that a little bit, and I'm going to explain to you why. Not that your experience isn't, like, your experience is your own and it is valid, but that's kind of not what I'm getting at. It's more, I think this is another example of, because you are so smart, that fear part of your brain oftentimes hijacks our biggest strength. In your instance, it's going to be intelligence, or one of them is going to be intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question was, how is, like, are there other parts of your life that not essentially creating your 10K norm is affecting? Your brain went into, again, giving me a high resolution answer of, well, what happens when I don't go into, like, when I hide and I am afraid of visibility? Well, I basically expend a lot of energy to do a little bit of work, and I'm basically expending a lot of energy for approval seeking through my posts. Cool. I can totally see how that would fall into what we already spoke about.
Right.
But I think there's a part of your brain that really doesn't like to explore, hear about, say, verbalize the truth of what is not transcending these aspects of self costing me, right? Like you mentioned, okay, I can't live my full life. Cool. So where's that showing up?
Well, so I left my job. I'm trying not to cry. I left my job, and not just pursued entrepreneurship, but I also started a van life journey. And about 6 months into what was supposed to be at least a year, our van started breaking down and I didn't have the money to fix it. And that felt like I finally trusted myself. And then it all came crashing down. I try not to cry, but I can't. It's just,
It's
yeah,
all good. As I said, in many podcast episodes, all emotions are valid, and whatever comes up,
yeah,
you don't need to apologize for it, because we're getting to a real place. And as I told you before we started recording, I appreciate your vulnerability in doing this, because what you're going through right now and the honesty through which you're going through right now is way more common than is made to believe in the highlight reel of Instagram.
yeah.
So that's why I just want to show my appreciation for you for diving into this deep place. And of course, at any time when you want to tell me to F off, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So
No, it's okay. I think this one in particular is catching me off guard because I felt like I was past it. But connecting these dots in this way makes me realize how big of a deal that was for me. Um, yeah, and I'm still in a place where I'm working to get financially in a position where I feel like I can do other things. I donated my car before we got in the van, which at the time felt like a really good idea. And then when I didn't have a van anymore, I didn't have a car, but now financially it's like, well, okay, that's another thing I got to add to my list now. I need a car, I need a house to live in, without consistent income, it's hard to get approved for things. So it's a lot. It just feels like this one thing is impacting my ability to move forward with everything.
yeah, so it seems to me that on the life side of things, where you are in your business right now, and more aptly in your ability to generate more business consistently, it's really put a pause button on everything, from house to car to experiences like van life, like basically to my lifestyle. Like right now I am locked in the limitation of what is in front of me. Like, is that accurate?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. So in this instance, we have a picture with regards to all of the fears stemming from, I don't trust myself, I'm not good enough to keep it. That's now seeping into my lifestyle. It's seeping into the activities that could get me out of this situation. And it's seeping into how I, spiral into doom loops or not. So it's like a big component, the inner part of why you're not moving forward. So before I go on, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So then if we look at and shift gears a little bit, because this obviously, like, you're very self-aware. This obviously isn't your first rodeo in trying to work through this.
Yeah.
What have you been doing to try and get out of this situation?
I've been trying to practice with the idea that actually I think I'm phrasing it wrong now that you say that, but I've been playing or practicing, I should say, with the idea that like I have everything I need to build the life that I want. That's something I've it's been true in my life, so I believe it, but keeping that at the forefront of my mind sometimes feels hard. But maybe
Well,
a
and
better.
just to kind of, and I'm going to apologize for cutting you off
It's
there. I
okay.
said, I believe I have everything that I need for my life. I believe you understand conceptually that you have everything you need. But if you truly believed it, would you be having the results that you have right now?
No.
Right. So you understand you have the potential to do all of these things. But because you can't show it, I would have to argue that you don't actually know it. Because I think even if you look at, and I've used this analogy before on the podcast, somebody said to you, I know how to drive. And you said, okay, cool, show me. And they're like, well, you turn the wheel, you press the gas, you press the brake. That's what I'm like, no, you understand how to drive. But if you can't show me, then you don't really know it, because it's a much different beast to change lanes and get onto highways and park and parallel park or whatever. Right. And I think in this instance, we have to be very careful with the language that we use, because I believe you understand that fundamentally you probably looked into it quite a bit in different areas, but it is another mask of that lack of self-trust. Like, yeah, but no, I know it. Well, no, you don't, because if you did, you would be able to show it. So does that resonate?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think in that, mm, that's been my focus, but I think a better focus would be the like the actual self-trust, that's that belief is one thing, but that's not really, I think, what I'm, like you said, I know it. So there's that element of it, but I don't know that that's really what I'm struggling with. I don't know that's what I'm grappling with on a
Okay.
day-to-day basis. So even that focus is like, that's something I need to learn and internalize, but that's even like another thing. I think there's a different focus that I should have
Okay.
altogether.
So elaborate on that. Like, what do you think that focus, like, what is it that you originally wanted to say before this came up?
No, so I that's what I was gonna say actually, is like, I don't know that focusing on that belief or internalizing that belief is really gonna help me solve the issue of self-trust. I mean, it's part of it, but I don't really think that that's what I need to like break through this
Got it.
place.
So that's more like, okay, so there is a lack of skill and a lack of competency on handling basically how I think, feel, and act in
Mhm,
accordance with my 10K norm. Is that
mhm.
accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So that I would actually put that in the kind of umbrella of what we discussed as like the first major problem. On the other kind of flip side, and I could have been more clear here, but there is oftentimes the inner problem, and then there is the like mechanical business issues, right? So when you look at your business as it is right now, do you feel like you're able to charge the prices that you want to charge, that you're working with the people that you want to work and the capacity that you want to work with them? Like, is anything coming up for that?
Yeah, pricing has always been tough because I talk about decluttering, and most people think that that means that I'm coming in to help them just tidy up their space. But I tell people it's not about the stuff, like you mentioned before. It's about what the stuff represents, right? So we do cover, well, what is the mindset that created this environment, and how is that impacting your habits, and how is that keeping you from your goal? So we do kind of this follow the trail or the breadcrumbs between the stuff and then like what that reflects about their life and the life that they've created. And so the struggle that I have around pricing a lot is feeling like, well, who's going to pay me th- thousands and thousands for this when most people just see this as some kind of cleanup, tidying activity.
Got it. Okay. So then there's one element of the pricing where the first thing we talked about is seeping in: the doubt, the confusion, the lack of self-trust to own that pricing. But I think on the kind of more mechanical, tactical side of things, there is the messaging, right? And I agree with
Mhm.
you, like, clean up my closet and give me $5,000. Like,
Right.
it doesn't really make sense. So there is the actual positioning, branding, and offer creation about, like, it sounds to me like there is a miss on what you truly do, and subsequently what you talk about, and subsequently what you try and sell.
Yeah, and I think I'm getting a little bit better at that. So you asked me, am I working with people I want to work with? That consistently is getting better, and I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to the kind of person and really attracting the person that I want to bring in. And so that is working, but that has been, it's still something that I'm struggling with. And I think it comes back to what we talked about of me not necessarily wanting to be visible. If I share my real experience in the way that I need to share it, people will see this isn't just about cleaning up, and I do that here and there, and I'm getting those people here and there, but that consistency is the result of not doing it consistently.
Got it. So it's like if I put your ideal soulmate client in front of you, there's almost this fear that I would screw it up because I wouldn't be comfortable selling my fullest offering to them. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So yeah, so I think it's, again, that whole sentiment of like what we identified before, and now the way that it's showing up for you in regards to executing on the business things. So there is a lack of the fundamentals, right? Like, okay, so if I were to sell this for $5,000, I don't have a clearly defined person or big enough problem that's structured in a way that resonates with them. Is that accurate
No, I would say I understand that it's in the application of it's in the messaging. So I know who I want to talk to, and I have worked with them in the past, but then putting out that consistent message is where I struggle. I in my head that those are two different things, but maybe there's a miss for me there.
So I agree. I think, okay. And that's actually a good distinction, right? So I think again goes back to the understanding versus knowing. Like, you understand what I'm talking about because it probably isn't your first rodeo in like looking at my avatar and creating the offer, etc. But right now you're confusing a lot of the self-worth aspects with the clarity on the business mechanics. Like it's seeping in and distorting your view of it, right? Like, yeah, I understand I need an offer that's different than cleaning out your closet for 5K, but all of the distortion that happens around that because I feel unworthy of it is going to keep you from either doing it effectively, or putting it out there, right? So even when you're speaking about it, like, even though you have the accolades and like I found your bio really cool and we're like aligned with you guys how we think about these things, there wasn't anything that came to me that I was like, oh, okay, like I know exactly who to refer to Jessica because, like, I understand who she works with, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, is that only the inner part, or is it the inner part and some fine tuning that needs to happen on the business side of things? That's the part that I'm unclear about. And also, and this is an assumption as well, but I'm assuming you haven't sold your package for 5K before or some higher price, or is that not accurate?
Yes and no. I have sold a big package. I've had a client that was 20K, but my fears rose up in that experience, and I don't think that I showed up as fully as I could have. Even though I made the revenue, I think I could have showed up differently, and my fears really impacted the way that I presented myself and operated in that scenario. So yeah, it's been done, but doing it again feels like it's still very far away.
Got it. Okay. So it again goes back to how much of an impact that inner part really has on you. So not only is it keeping you from the lifestyle bit, it's also keeping you, and I'm assuming that was more like a kind of corporate setup, less than like working for an individual. It was an individual.
It was an individual, but it was a high net worth individual. Yeah.
Perfect. So you can see how much potential revenue that's caused. Like, forget 10K a month. Like, you sell one of these a month and you've more than made your 10K norm, right? So now it's like this seeping, like, yeah, you could optimize certain things on the business side of things, but really, if you want to focus on the main domino and you want to know what game to play, it really comes down to, if I'm continue to create this from a place of I'm not worthy to keep it, nothing really is going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. That feels right. It feels like like I said, it feels like I like got these big things, but I I skipped some steps in the middle there.
Correct. Well,
Yeah.
the good news is when you are able to get to a place where you have ownership of that, that will be an accelerant on the pieces you do have that are actually pretty good. Could they use some tweaking? 100%. We all can use some tweaking, but that is where I think you're going to get the multiplicative effects that you're looking for. So from that vantage point, I know we can't dive into all of these aspects on one recording, but does that feel complete for you? Is there something else that's left outstanding?
No, that feels pretty complete. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Well, thank you once again for volunteering to do something like this. I know it's not the funnest of experiences, but like I said in the middle of the call, it does shine light on how real your experience actually is, because so many hearts and entrepreneurs that are in your situation go through this, and this normalizes that experience. So I thank you for that on behalf of myself and all the other listeners. And then at this point, then floor is yours to let everybody know who you are, where they can find you, who's the perfect person to find you. Floor is yours for all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks. So yeah, again, my name is Jessica, and I am the creator of Not Your Average Fro, and I help high achievers who feel like they've checked all the boxes and they've been living a life based on other people's expectations, break free of their discouraging beliefs so that they can launch a business, increase their savings, or even lose weight with ease. And the process that I leverage is decluttering, and we really go deep into not just your stuff, but how your stuff and the mindsets behind it have replicated in various aspects of your life, your home, your habits, your mind, and of course, in the pursuit of your goals. You can find me on Instagram at Nacho Average Fro. That's NACHO for the nacho. And then you can also find me online at nachoaveragefro.com.
Awesome. We will include all of that in the show notes. So Jessica, thank you very much for coming on today. And for everybody else, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.